had the extraordinary feeling that all these cars were gathering for some special reason I didn't understand. There seemed to be 10 times as much traffic.
My parents knew when I graduated college I was coming back to Canada, and my parents knew Vice President at CBC, who gave me an introduction to John Hirsch and Muriel Sharon, who were expanding the CBC casting department, but the drama department. And I got hired on as a casting assistant, which is essentially, you're an entry-level apprentice. First feature film, I left CBC and joined Claire Walker, and that year, I just jumped in the deep end because she had a lot of contracts on the go. But I guess the most well-known one was The Grey Fox. I was doing that, and then I remember that year we had a number of films, because this would have been 1980, and it was, the height of the tax credit film, so there were a lot being made. Incubus, I was casting that then. So that was it, but not with David. Claire had cast with David before, but in 81, she was working on, and I was sort of her support, but I didn't really hang with him so much for Videodrome. And so was Videodrome, and then I began to take it over, just because Claire got busy with something else. And that's when David and I met, and we really got along, and then I just continued. We just got along well, that's all. We sort of spoke the same language. We are interested in interesting stories, slightly subversive, and interesting actors, slightly subversive, who have more than one level to them, but primarily he really liked to tell his stories through interesting faces, strong faces, and that's my meat and drink. So. With The Dead Zone, in fact, there was it was an American-produced film. I'm pretty sure that they had an American casting director, so I wasn't involved a lot in casting the leads. The challenge was Dino De Laurentiis, just because he had very specific ideas of actors, and he based it totally based on what they looked like. And so we had a situation where we brought, and he wanted to meet the people that we wanted to cast. And then the one thing to be said is he trusted that we were just bringing in really good actors. So then it came down to what story he wanted to tell, and we sort of had a slightly different idea for just a couple of people, and we introduced them to him in a 30-second interview, and he would go yes or no, and we didn't expect that. It was a surprise, so that was a learning experience. We actually found other people, because the thing about David is that he's got a really strong idea of what he has in mind. He's making this movie in his head, but he will adapt. Sometimes he'll adapt in just a little tiny thing. I remember for one movie, in fact it was for Dead Ringers, there was an actor who auditioned for us, and he threw in a little tiny ad-lib, which added a great thing. It was a small part. And David looked and went, oh. And that line ended up in the movie, and the poor actor's interpretation of the role, David adapted, took over. The actor didn't get the gig. But anyway, but that's what I'm saying is he's like, so, there are some auteur directors that you work with who just this is it. They've pre-planned it and nothing. Whereas with David, it's not so much compromising, but he will see strengths in another approach. So, I mean, Dead Zone was one of those ones where we went, okay, but what he has, what Dino De Laurentiis has in mind is one way of going. We were going a slightly different way, but we said, okay, we can make that work. And then I said, well, just how about this actress? And I showed him the picture, and he went, yes, that's it. So it worked out. But there was that short period of time when we went, oh my God, what's going to go on here? Are we, but then we did find a way to make it work.
The traffic. Where is everyone? They've all gone away.
We actually met Geena Davis right at the very beginning of our casting process. And she gave a terrific reading, but she wasn't known then. So we went to LA and we went to New York and we auditioned all these people, and nobody was good as Geena, so she got the part. So it was interesting, because usually the lower budgeted movies I work on don't have that flexibility, so that was fun to do. He was involved by the time I was brought on, because originally I was just asked to cast the local Toronto people, and then of which there were not going to be many, but then they asked me to work on that. It was at his suggestion that we gave Geena an audition, and then she gave this audition. We thought, oh, we have to see his girlfriend, right? And then she gave the audition, and and she found things in the character. That was it. So we kept asking other people we auditioned to try find those same things, and they couldn't in the same way. She just understood the character, and it was good. She's so smart, not only having great presence on screen, but it was great that she didn't think of this as a horror film or anything. She saw the humanity in it, and that's the path that she took, and it was lovely.
Dr. Remington.
Normally, I'm a very squeamish person, but with David's movies not, because I can always follow. I guess because I know the intent, but it's also there. There's all the squeamish things, etc., but they're there for a reason, and it comes out of human feelings and the human condition. So I'm always there with him in his storytelling, following that, and that's. I think, often he'll, give me a script and I'll be going, oh, really? And he'll say, just take a breath. And he's right, because I'm really very, I don't mind the odd rom-com,
Why are the police taking this so seriously?
No, it's not the police, it's the Department of Transport. It's a big joke. They have no idea who we really are.
Certainly with Dead Ringers, we had a tough time at the beginning casting the female part. I think it's because, the people who have learned to know David will just jump in. And what's happened now is that amongst the actors, on Naked Lunch, Ian Holm, when he got the script, he didn't know what to think of it. So he called Jeremy Irons, and Jeremy said, just do it. You're going to have the best time. Don't worry about the script. Trust the director. You're going to have an amazing time. And Ian did. So what's happened now is that kind of story has gone around, and even if the material is difficult, people will still sign on because they've heard it's so wonderful to work with David. But when we were doing the Dead Ringers and even Naked Lunch is that people didn't know him yet. And in fact, I think because of The Fly, they obviously recognized he was a great filmmaker, but wondered, you know, did they want to enter into that weird world? And particularly for the women, because the first opening scene is, you know, she's in an office getting a gynecological, is that the word, exam, and most of the actresses just read that and went, nope, no thank you. What's interesting when it came then, when we went, okay, we're not going to get because we were looking for a UK actress, and we said, well, we'll cast a Canadian then, and because the Canadian actresses, I mean, Genevieve, like that, said yes, because she knew from other people who had worked with him, and there were a couple of other people that we had talked to and they were all there and all interested. With Jeremy Irons was very intrigued by it, but he said, before I sign on, I want to know if I can do this. It wasn't so much an audition as he wanted to explore the technical things side of what that would entail and how it would restrict him, and could he work within those restrictions. And he did. He came over and he tested, and then at the end he said, yeah, no, I can do this. But it was a real challenge. And then I had to find an actor who looked like him. Was it John Bayliss who did it? I think so. Who actually was originally British, who had the same, it wasn't just even the same height, but he had to, from behind, he had to have the same sort of neck and similar hairline and ears. And then he, you know, acted with Jeremy all the way through. It was Jeremy's face. It was all the over-the-shoulder shots and stuff like that. So it's one of those things of a bit of a, I mean, he was an essential part of the filmmaking, but a bit of a thankless job. But Jeremy had to have this, that for the technique, whereas now you don't have to in the same way. I'm part of the team, and especially with Cronenberg, I mean, we're totally partners on this. I'm not saying, David, here's your cast. It doesn't work that way. And of course, especially with your lead, because it's a matter of them being available, affordable, and then right for the part. You're not sure which one comes first, and it's a tricky balance, huh? Because it really influences what your movie's going to be. You know, there were a number of people that we did. Now, what's interesting is so many of the actors who were people who were interested in working with David, and so they got the script and they read it and everything. And I believe it wasn't so much the weirdness of it that restricted or was the reason behind them not doing it. I think it was the concern about the technical things, because, and when they finally got into it, David said, thank God with Jeremy, because with all that British theatrical training, where it served him beautifully, whereas so many of the American actors who come from the more sort of spontaneous and being truthful too, and there's a different take every time, it would have been much more difficult. And also, it's a tough place to put your head if you think about it. You have to live in a really dark place when you're playing those guys. He loved Naked Lunch. He came to us. He wrote David and said, I hear you're doing this. He was obsessed with Burroughs, and then David went, yeah, because he was like, so in fact it was one of the few times when casting the lead was a very straightforward thing. And because, ironically, because of doing RoboCop, he was very high in the standings. So, well, you couldn't think of a more different movie, could you? With M. Butterfly, we did have someone who you wouldn't have known. But at the end of the day, the thing what John had was he was a seductor. Very seductive guy. And there was a lovely actor we saw who, perfect face, the whole thing. But he would have been seduced rather than doing the seducing. And I think, too, David felt that Jeremy Irons' character wanted to be seduced. And so, it was, it was tough. It was tough finding, because we had 2 or 3 ways of going with it, but at the end of the day, John came to meet with David. I picked him up at the airport and brought him there, and they just immediately connected, and they saw they could do the movie together. There's a certain kind of actor that we look for. We needed people who were literate, subtle, real. We wanted people to be who were real people within this maybe unreal situation, or people, like with Rosanna Arquette, with all the paraphernalia she had to deal with. We needed somebody in that role who was humane and multi-layered, and somebody that you would know, so that we didn't want it to be cartoon at any moment. So that was the big challenge, if you want, was to find people who satisfied the needs of the distributors, some sort of name recognition, but who were actors too, who were adventuresome, because this is an adventuresome script, who were up to a challenge, but at the same time, at the very heart of it, who could be real people on screen. Otherwise, the story wouldn't have the same resonance.
I'd like to see if I can fit into a car designed for a normal body. Could you help me into it, please?
David had met him somewhere. I negotiated the deal, I remember. We have lists of people that we look at. And at that point, indeed now too, because of the success of his television show, he's on lists. And he certainly, we liked the idea of his, at that point, is that, he had all this complexity inside, but on the surface, he was an everyday guy. Not an everyday middle-class guy. And that was kind of a nice juxtaposition. What I like to do, because if I'm beginning to fight for somebody, then, or if I decide this is the person we want, then I lose my, I can't cast it properly. I don't think so. My job is to say, okay, that's the direction you'd like to go. Let me find the person who's like that. Or that's the story, because sometimes during the midst of it, you have an idea at the beginning, and then you go through the casting process, and you realize, you know what? there's a quality there we're missing. Well, if I fall in love with somebody else, I'm not going to be able to adapt as easily. So I really believe in my job is to present choices, not make the choice. In that film, we had, for his wife, the part that Deborah cast, there were 2 or 3 different ways of going. The question was going to be, how vulnerable was she? You know, we didn't want her to be a victim, but we didn't also wanted him to be a victim. So it was to get that balance, I thought, was kind of important, and that, I think, affected. The great thing about Deborah Unger was that she's got a cool playfulness, which is nice. She's sort of an old-fashioned siren thing that was, at that time, it was not something that sort of roles that women were, or aspects of their art that they were developing. So I found, yeah, that was interesting. I was, when I first met her, I was doing a movie for Jeremy Thomas that Nagisa Oshimo, they were supposed to do together, and then it didn't work out. The film didn't work out, and I met Deborah in LA, and I went, whoa, this is really interesting, because there was in the movie we needed a sort of a siren, and she would have been perfect in the part, but then the movie fell apart, and I remembered her from that. So I don't think David knew her. And then I remember there were 2 or 3 other people that he met, and that really became, I mean, they were all terrific actresses, but this is, the final casting has as much to do with how they will affect the story.
What's going on?
They've been questioning Vaughn about an accident at the airport. A pedestrian was killed. They think he was run over intentionally.
I guess you just have to figure out, you know, well, just what I was, I think, referring to. We didn't want to have Deborah's character be a victim. It's the one film that perhaps, you know, edges with exploitation, and you don't want it to be, and that was. And I always felt that the strength of David's movies is that they deal with tough material, but they're not exploitive. And I think that was because you're dealing with various kinds of sexuality, etc., that there are vulnerable populations that might feel that he was almost stepping over a line. But I don't think, well, I know that was not the intent, and I don't think it did at the end of the day. He has a distinctive voice, and he has a vision, that sounds like, but he has in each time he has a story that he's making, and he's he knows what he wants. So, you know, my job is to tease him, to try and say, so at times he will say to me, because now I just record auditions because he's not in the auditioning room with me. So we're just talking on the phone. In fact, we just saw each other the other day. We realized it'd been about 4 years, even though we've been talking a lot, but we're not face to face, because with the computer, I record the auditions. And it began really with M. Butterfly, where I, went to Asia on his behalf, etc. And I just record everything and come home, because he really doesn't like to, get on the plane if he doesn't have to. So, but now that's what I do is, and I hold all the auditions, but occasionally he'll say, so that's how you saw the scene. And I say, okay, tell me, I'll redo it. No, he said it was just sort of interesting. And I'm going, oh, right, now what is... But now I've got to the point where I go, yes, it could be done that way, but it can be done another way. Let's try it.
After this sort of thing, how do people manage to look at a car, let alone drive one?
There was a time when I only was doing feature films, and now I'm doing more television, so I do a lot of stuff for Shaftesbury and then doing Kim's Convenience, and it's really, really satisfying. But it's nice to do a movie, so I was actually going to take, because the problem with being an independent contractor is getting things like a holiday is a really, really difficult thing, and I was going to take off January and February, and then I got an email and it said, Vigo here, will you come and do my movie with me? And I went to my husband and said, you know, Viggo Mortensen is directing his first movie and he wants me to work on it with him. And he said, okay, do it. And what was interesting is that we never met, you know, because, I mean, as I know his manager, I know his lawyer, but I never met him personally, and I never went to set because, especially with, we did 3 movies. So, and he said, I liked all the people that I was working with. So he said, I know you do good work. Will you do good work for me too? And I was sitting there and I said, this is a great job.